Welcome to Mark D. Maker. My name is Mark Taylor, and today we're going to be working on the eyes of an owl. Now, eyes seem to be a problem spot for some carvers. I'll show you some tips and tricks on how to make it a little easier. Come on over to the workbench. Let's get started.
All right, I'll pick up right where we left off at the last video. These lines here, splitting the bird in half from side to side and left to right. And then these 45-degree angles coming out, and you can see that they come down right in the center of the lowest part of the channel, and that's where the eye is. So I used a number 7 gouge. Now, a lot of carvers will use a 1/4 inch ruby ball and go straight in and then undercut, creating a channel for the eye to sit in. I simply use this little number 7 palm gouge because I'm a little more confident with it, and I undercut where the eyebrow or where the eyelid and eyebrow would be. So if you're using a ruby ball, create the channel and undercut, a gouge or a knife, undercut.
So most carvers use some sort of an epoxy, mixes A and B together. They say you should wear gloves when mixing it, but after it's mixed, it's okay to handle it without gloves. I don't know why that is so, but that's what the directions say. So we'll mix up a small batch of this, put a little bit in each one of the eyes. Now, when you're mixing, if you have a 2-part, you want to keep and don't cross-contaminate. Don't mix up the lids. That's pretty important. So you'll use 2 different utensils to get the putty out from each one. Each one is dedicated. Let's put it that way. It's dedicated to its own. And so it looks like I need just a little bit more of this one. That looks pretty good. Sometimes I even go less hardener to give me more time to work with the eye. Now, once I set the eye, I usually give it 24 hours to cure. When you first get this and open it, it does smell like ammonia, but it doesn't, that smell wears away pretty quickly. I'm going to mix it really, really well. There's some people use stuff, it's called green stuff. It's a 2-part epoxy. I used to use it. I find this a little bit more user-friendly. This is water soluble, which is really nice. You can use a little bit of water and just smooth it right out. You can sculpt with it. So we're gonna really fill up that eye socket with clay. So it's really filled up. And these will, now they're gonna get adhesive on them while you're handling them. you'll just clean them up later. And you're going to press them in because you don't want it to be bug-eyed. So we're starting to press these in. Now, as a visual cue for myself, I have these lines. They come straight down the face, and that's the line for the pupils to line up. And then I want to get them horizontally lined up as well. They should be flat surface at 45-degree angles. They should not be facing straight forward. It'll give it a very flat face. And it shouldn't be any more than 45 degrees over, like on the side of the head. So I'm really mashing that epoxy. Really getting that eye to where I think it should be. I'm going to peel off a little bit of this stuff that I don't need, just with my finger. So you can see a side view there of how much it's sticking out. That's probably still a little much. Now, something that I did do is before I put the eye in, I did sand around all the way around the hole that I put it in to give it a more gradual in. You don't want sharp lines here, and you don't want to have to go into this area near the eye with sandpaper because you can easily scratch these glass eyes. Now you can replace the eyes. You can take out the epoxy putty, and even after it's dried, you can remove it, replace the eye. There's always repairs. You can always repair it. But it can be aggravating. And to save the aggravation, do your sanding before you put the eye in. Removing a little bit of the extra putty. I got those eyes in. I'm using my hands to feel. Your hands are much more sensitive to height and feeling than your eyes are. So use your hands and you can really feel if they're set in equally, as much, into the putty and into the bird. And that feels pretty good. Well, this one went pretty easily for me. There's times that you have to work at it for a long period of time to get them right. And I am pretty happy with that. I'm looking at it right side up, upside down, squinting my eyes and looking at it. 3/4 view. You know, it's not perfect. But yeah, if I was competing with it, I would continue to mess with this. But I'm pretty satisfied with it for an art piece. Now what I'm going to do is that went pretty quick, so this putty still may be good for a while. Is I'll roll this real thin and drape it around the eyes and use water and a toothpick to make the eyelids. All right, well, I've made a little snake out of the epoxy. And I'm just gonna lay it right around the eye. If you don't want whatever you're using to kind of crimp down this clay to stick to the clay, just a little bit of water on it and it won't stick. So I just got a little ring around the eye there. And now I'm going to kind of crimp this down around the outside of the eye so the epoxy will stick to the wood there. And that will start to form the eyelid and hold that eye in there forever and ever. Clay starts to stick to it, just wet it. I know, so I said I was going to use a toothpick, but I happen to have a small paintbrush and that works just as well. Now you can wet it and really start to form it and to shape it to smooth it out the way you want. should have some reference materials, so either hit the internet or reference books or whatever reference material you can find. If you're lucky enough to be by a museum, they have, in the Smithsonian, they have study references where they have birds that have met their demise through hitting a window or whatever else, that have been taxidermied. They're not in a pose, they're in a taxidermy, kind of like in a state like this. But you can go there and, like a book, check them out and look at the feathers, study the anatomy. These places are made available with your tax money, so you should take advantage of it and use those facilities, because you're paying for it. It's there for the sciences, but the arts are allowed and encouraged. Okay, so you can see where we're at now. And so this gives me a nice smooth transition. It gives me a little bit of a ledge here. And I can continue to look at reference material and compare it to this and make any changes I need by using a paintbrush, toothpicks, any kind of a sculpting tool, your X-Acto knife. The main thing is patience. Just take it easy. This is supposed to be an enjoyable hobby, so make it enjoyable. Put on some nice music and enjoy the ride. All right, so while I have my putty and it's still pliable, I'm going to bring out the beak just a little bit. I'm going to just push it out a bit. I don't need that much. Kind of crimp it in here. Becoming a little, I'm going to wet it a little bit. Maybe that will help it stick. I'm going to wet my fingers a little bit too, because it won't stick to my fingers. That's starting to feel better. Now this is carvable. You can carve this once it's dried. It does get hard, very hard, but it is carvable. That's what I'm looking for. All right. Now I also want to add to the brow, because I did take too much off the brow here and here. The clay is still, the putty is still workable. I just added a little bit of water to thin it out to make it a little easier to manipulate, but it's not hardening up yet.
Remember this song from the little carving I did of Charlie Chaplin? I thought it was very appropriate.
So a lot of bird carvers will say they're actual sculptors, because because we're obviously not carving wood right now. We're working with epoxy. So in a sense, it is sculpting. But I consider myself more of a wood carver than a sculptor. Although I do stone carving and copper carving or copper sculpture. I've been wood carving for much longer. Just taking water in now, smoothing out this transition. Birds of prey have this heavy brow, gives them a tough guy look. And I really wanted that to come through. And you can start to see I can feel it starting to firm up a little bit. That heavy brow really gives them attitude. Helps to tell a story. Now this is sandable and carvable, like I said. So I'll be able to go in here and manipulate all of this at a later time. It's starting to get a little tricky to work with. It is easier to carve while it's still soft, that's for sure. So if you see areas that are too thick, you might as well take advantage of the soft epoxy. I'll continue to work with it.
Now here you can see I've carved a lot of it away, and it's in a very square shape here. And I will go in and carve a little bit, round it out a little bit, and I'll sand it. Now it's still a little bit on the wet side. It's firm, but it's like epoxy or like a Bondo in a way. So when you sand it, it really clogs up your sandpaper, like so. But easy to sand.
All right, so it's been over an hour since I did this putty mix, and it's the consistency of like a hard rubber or plastic. It's bendable, it's breakable. It won't be for much longer, but it was very carvable too. Kind of carved like, it felt like stiff Bondo. If you've ever done any auto body work, it's what it feels like, stiff Bondo. And it's continuing to get hard. As you saw how it clogged up the sandpaper earlier, and a little bit more, it won't clog the sandpaper and it'll sand simply off into a dust. I'm going to do a little bit more work on the eyelids to give it a little tougher look. Now, I've talked with some carvers, and they really have issues with doing the eyes. And I would say the eyes themselves, they're pretty cheap. A couple dollars, and you can get 2 eyes. I buy them, a bunch at a time.
And I would just, if you're new, I would practice. Round off a piece of 2x4. Don't even, bother putting them in basswood or Tupelo. Why spend the money? Round off a piece of 2x4 and practice setting eyes. You can set them, and if you like them, you can keep them as an example. If you don't, just take them right out. You could even use clay that never hardens. But being able to move the eye around, getting them centered, practice. It's all about practice.
So here I'm wetting the clay and simply pushing it and pulling it in different directions to get the shape that I want. If you watch, I'll push and then I'll pull with the bristles or pull with the back of the brush. And I'm trying to achieve a particular shape. When the epoxy is wet, it is very easy to move. So use a gentle touch.
So you can see you can really change an attitude with these eyebrows. You can make a huge difference in the attitude, and that's the feeling that you're getting across to the person, in the end, the experience that they have when they view this. So take your time and play around and try different things with the eyes. You'll be amazed at what just little differences you can make with eyelids or whatever else. You can just get so much expression and so much attitude with eyelids and the eyes and the eyebrows, or areas that would be eyebrows. So play around with it.
So here's where we are so far. Please like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.